Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we're reviewing books of all genres, hoping to find the best of fun books. Today we are doing Sharpe's Tiger by Bernard Cornwell. It's part of a series. There's a whole bunch of Sharpe's something, Sharpe's Triumph, Sharpe's whatever. This is the first book in the series. So I thought, before reading it, there was going to be something a little bit more like Indiana Jones type of an independent adventurer in India in the late 1700s, early 1800s. It turns out I was wrong. This is a historical fiction, and specifically a military historical fiction. So, this is definitely not an adventure book. It is definitely all about the battles and the war and the soldiers and their actions and stuff. All right, so let me give you the plot. The plot starts out, so we are about to engage in a historical battle in India for British control of India, battling against Muslim French control over India. The poor Hindus are just kind of not in control of India at this time, or at least not in this region. So the Sharpe is a British private soldier, and the enemy is the Tippo and his regiments, his army, in a city. And so the British are going to come and try and take the city before the monsoon season comes. They cannot siege the city for very long because of the monsoons that would just basically wash them away. So they have to either take it or retreat. Success or defeat in this battle is basically going to determine the fate of India. If they succeed, then British will have control of India. If they fail, then Napoleon and the French are likely to come in and have control over India. So that's kind of the historical background. This particular battle, so it starts out, you have Sharpe, our main character, is a private, the lowest of the low, just a musket soldier in a brigade of the British Army, and he's just part of the army. Meanwhile, a higher up, he's not called the spy master, but we'll call him that, the spy master of the British Army, goes to meet a contact who wants to help the British defeat the Muslim French army in this city, and he tells them a secret. He says, do not invade by the west. It's a trap. If you come by the west, which looks like the weakest, the most obvious place to attack, there's going to be a trap set, like basically a bomb that will enclose your troops in a tight area and then blow them all up. Don't do it. And the spy master is like, oh, okay, we got to do this. But on his way back to his army, he gets captured and taken to the city. And so he's got this secret that his army needs to know that he can't get out. And the back to the British Army, they realize that their spy master has gone away, and he probably had intel. They don't know what it is, but he probably had something. So they decide to hatch a plot to send somebody to the city to try and rescue their spy master, or at the very least get the information. So Sharpe is being harassed by his commanders, harassed to the point that he's basically been sentenced to death. And so the army kind of looks at him and says, you know what, that seems like a good guy to send. He's already kind of on the outs. It would make sense for him to betray the army and run away, be a traitor, be a turncoat, to abscond to the enemy's side. He has an excuse that they would be believed, right? If he went to the opposing side and surrendered and said, I am a turncoat, I will help you. So they snatch him up after he's been brutally whipped. So he's got lots of bloody back when he goes. And he goes off with a fellow soldier who's more of an officer than he is. And so they head off. They are captured by the enemy. They're believed to be traitors that are totally excited to be part of the French Muslim army. And so they managed to get successfully into the city. And then the rest of the story is how they get the information, how do they escape detection, how do they eventually get the information out, how do they escape, all these kind of things. So that's kind of the story of this. So the things I like about this, I really like the plot. It's clever. There are a lot of little points that I'm like, oh, that was good. That was a good way of getting out of this, situation, or a good way of handling this problem that somebody comes across. And it is just the whole thing overall was a good, well-written plot. I really liked that. The story itself was good. The historical fiction details were pretty amazing. So for example, so this is in the era of muskets, just after, it's after the American Revolution, so, the rifle is basically just been invented and the common soldier doesn't have it. Instead you deal with muskets with the swords on the end, the bayonets. So that kind of weaponry. And it's pretty interesting reading about how they work fighting those. So, for example, the book is pretty close to the beginning, has all the soldiers getting ready, lining up in a row, and all the commands they have to do before they fire. It is over 10 commands between lining up and when they can actually pull the trigger. And so you're sitting there going, wow, that's a lot. I mean, it was like a page and a half or something of all these commands before they could actually do anything. And I'm thinking, well, no wonder it took them so long to fire a single bullet. So guns were not, they used them as an initial volley. And if you had lots of time, maybe a second one. But for the most part, you did one volley and then charge with your bayonet and, you fight hand to hand. So anyway, so that was interesting historical details. Beyond that, there were things like the different religions. That was kind of interesting. So you had the Hindus, and what did they think of all this? What did they think between the Muslims and the French and the British? What was their opinion of all this? You have the Muslim people and how do they react, and some of the details, like this particular sect of Muslim people circumcised all their soldiers. So a British soldier who's defecting over to them was not thrilled to hear this, as you can imagine. Like, what? So, just details like that that are interesting from a historical perspective. So lots of historical details. The author did a fantastic job on this. There's an author's note at the very end that tells you what was real and what wasn't. And a lot of it was close enough to real. Let's put it that way. That as any historical fiction, you gotta fudge the details to make it actually an interesting story. Otherwise, it's just nonfiction. But it was fun. Okay, now on to things I disliked. This is a brutal, gory, gritty, dark story. All the details of the fighting. You have, for example, one soldier, almost kills another, and he's like starting to pat the enemy soldier down for loot. Like, where's the money? Where's the jewels? Where's the whatever? And, and then kills him after he finds it. And it's just a lot of dark stuff. Our main character gets flogged. So he's whipped, 200 times, and it's very brutal, very dark. The torture, there's lots of torture of soldiers and creative ways of killing people, just all the time, all over the place. Very, very bloodthirsty, the entire thing. The soldiers, there's no compassion or empathy for anybody at any time, pretty much at all. It's always just, glory in killing people and looting the bodies and stuff. It's just kind of, yeah. Women, there's a lot of serious degradation of women. There's There's almost no positive interactions or encounters or whatever with women. It's all prostitutes and forced prostitution, and it's a little too graphic in that respect. Talking about one character talking to another about how they want to force somebody into prostitution and all that would entail, and that was yucky. So yes, women are not treated well. This may be a little bit of historical accuracy. It may be fictional, but either way, it was very, we'll just say yuck. Just leave it at that. Another thing I didn't like were the characters themselves. So I've already told you some of the things that the characters doing between, horribly killing each other and the way they treat women and everything. None of the characters come across as especially likable. Our main character, Richard Sharpe, is clever. He several times, comes up with good ideas and implements them well. But he's not a likable man. He was a murderer, a cutthroat, a thief before he became a soldier, and he likes being a soldier because he can murder and steal and loot or whatever with impunity, with the government's permission, and he likes that. And he's not kind. There's no softness in him at all. There's nothing really that you come away from him except for his intelligence in a way that you end up going, wow, he's such a great man. I mean, even by the end, there's no real character growth or anything from this character. It's the plot. It's not character that drives this story. So you don't end up, at least I didn't, end up liking pretty much anybody. Some of the one character, so I said Richard Sharpe went to the other city and he went with an officer. So the officer he went with is probably the most likable character in the book. He's not a main character, he's a side character, but he is in the book a significant enough portion. And, he does seem to be a he's a weak man, but kind. He tries to do what's right as opposed to everybody else who's just trying to be selfish. So, there isn't exclusively horrible, evil people, but for the most part they are. So I didn't like the characters. This is the religious aspect. So this is something I didn't like. So I didn't mind the depiction of the Muslims, the Hindus, but the European soldiers, the British soldiers, refer to themselves as the Christian army. There's nothing Christian about them. So the religious aspect, that respect, it felt very ugly to me because it kind of misrepresented Christianity. There's one truly evil soldier, the person that tried to have Richard Sharpe killed, his bullying sergeant, who constantly says, the scriptures say so, to support his evil actions. And nothing he ever says is actually in the scripture. But unless you're actually familiar with the scripture, you might think that they're actually in there, and I didn't really like that. If you're going to say something is from the Bible, I think it should actually be in the Bible as opposed to just saying, I don't know, we gotta flog a man until he's, screaming, the scripture said so, or something like that. And you're like, no, anyway, I just didn't personally like that depiction of Christianity because it was so awful and dark and evil. So I didn't like that. There is no levity, lightness, humor in this book to break up some of the dark, gritty ugliness of humanity. So I didn't really like that. So my overall view of this book is, I'm going to put it as okay, is my category that I'm putting it in. I think if I was grading it just on how well it's written, I would give it a huge thumbs up. I think it's well written. If I was grading it just based on the plot, I would give it 2 thumbs up. But it was so unlikable as far as both how they treat women, the gore, the brutality, the characters, that it's not a fun book. So it's a good book, well written, but not fun. So that's why I'm just putting it in okay. So that's my review of that one. I'm not planning on reading any more of this series. If that's your thing, then, try it out, but I don't particularly recommend this book. So yeah, that's pretty much my review on that one. So part 2. My next book is going to be a lighthearted fantasy called All Too Familiar by Belinda White. And this is, it looks like it's going to be a book about magic, just a fantasy, modern fantasy adventure. And unfortunately, it's an audio book that I'm reading, so I can't hold up a picture for you. Maybe I'll put a picture up on after I've finished recording this, but I don't have one to show you right now. But it looks fun, so I hope you join me, and thank you for watching.